Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Former President Donald Trump is expected to turn himself in today to face criminal charges in a New York City court. The case stems from hush money payments Trump made to adult film star Stormy Daniels days before the 2016 presidential election, just days after the release of the infamous Access Hollywood tape in which Trump brags about sexually assaulting women. While the indictment remains sealed, Newsweek's reporting Trump will face 34 felony counts for falsifying business records. He is the first former U.S. president to ever be criminally charged. His arraignment hearing is scheduled for 2:15 p.m. Trump supporters, including far-right Georgia Congressmember Marjorie Taylor Greene, are expected to rally outside the courthouse. As head of those protests, New York City Mayor Eric Adams issued a warning to people he called rabble-rousers.
Control yourselves. New York City is our home, not a playground for your misplaced anger. We are the safest large city in America because we respect the rule of law in New York City. And although we have no specific threats, people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is known to spread misinformation and hate speech, she stated she's coming to town.
After his arraignment, Trump's expected to fly back to his Florida Mar-a-Lago estate, where he'll speak publicly tonight. We'll have more on Trump after headlines with Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter David K. Johnston. The government of the Philippines has announced the location of 4 new U.S. military bases. The sites will be on the island of Luzon, facing north towards Taiwan, and on Palawan, near the disputed Spratly Islands in the South China Sea. This comes after the Biden administration in February reached an agreement with the administration of Philippines President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. to give the U.S. access to the military bases amidst rising tensions between Washington and Beijing. Protesters have condemned the move, demanding U.S. troops leave the Philippines. Syrian state media reports 2 civilians were killed overnight as Israeli missile strikes hit the capital, Damascus. Video of the attack appears to show a defense system hitting several targets in the sky with audible explosions. It was reportedly the 4th attack by Israel in Damascus in recent days and followed the deaths of 2 Iran-affiliated fighters in an airstrike Sunday. In Tehran, thousands of people gathered at a funeral for the 2 men earlier today. This is Hossein Salami, commander-in-chief of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps.
I will say one thing. We will definitely take revenge.
In Russia, Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich has filed an appeal after he was arrested last week and charged with espionage. He faces up to 20 years in prison if convicted by a court in Moscow. On Sunday, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said he'd spoken with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov about Gershkovich's case, as well as that of another imprisoned American, Paul Whelan. Florida's Republican-controlled state Senate has approved a near-total ban on abortion. The measure, which is backed by Republican Governor Ron DeSantis, prohibits abortions in most cases after just 6 weeks. During a floor debate in Florida's state Senate Monday, Jacksonville Democrat Tracy Davis condemned the bill as an unprecedented government overreach into the lives of women and shared her own story of having an abortion.
I refused to have anyone make me feel ashamed and to not acknowledge it. And no woman should have to feel ashamed because she decided to have an abortion. But now we're talking about a 6-week abortion ban. And you've heard it from many women on this floor. Most women don't even know they're pregnant by the time they're in the 6th week.
On Monday evening, at least 11 people were arrested at a pro-choice protest that erupted outside Tallahassee City Hall. Among those taken into custody were Florida Democratic Party Chair Nikki Fried and State Senate Minority Leader Lauren Book. In Tennessee, thousands of students in Nashville walked out of their classrooms Monday and marched to the state capitol, demanding lawmakers pass gun control legislation, including a ban on assault weapons. The action came 1 week after a shooter killed 3 adults and 3 9-year-old students at a private Christian elementary school in Nashville. Meanwhile, Tennessee Republican leaders have removed 3 Democratic lawmakers from their committee assignments for participating in peaceful protests following the mass shooting. On Monday, large crowds of protesters in the gallery of the Tennessee House of Representatives erupted in chants of fascists as members of the Republican supermajority moved to permanently expel Democratic Representatives Justin Jones of Nashville, Gloria Johnson of Knoxville, and Justin Pearson of Memphis. This is Representative Justin Jones.
Each of us represents 78,000 people, and our people are being silenced because they're kicking us off committees. They're threatening to take a vote to expel us today. Our member ID badges have been shut off. Our representative ID badges have been shut off. And this is not what democracy looks like. You know, we are elected to serve our constituents, and I'm the youngest Democratic lawmaker here, the most diverse district, and by shutting me down, they're shutting down the voice of my constituents.
The Virginia Medical Examiner's Office has confirmed that 28-year-old Ivo Ocheno died by homicide by asphyxiation after he was violently pinned down and piled on by sheriff's deputies and medical staff at the Central State Hospital in Petersburg, March 6th. Ocheno was a 28-year-old black man whose violent death during a mental health crisis renewed calls for police accountability. His official cause of death is listed as positional and mechanical asphyxiation with restraints. Last month, the Virginia grand jury indicted 10 people, 7 sheriff's deputies and 3 hospital workers on second-degree murder charges for Ocheno's killing. The Department of Justice has filed a civil lawsuit against Norfolk Southern, accusing the U.S. railroad giant of violations of the Clean Water Act over the February 3rd derailment of a freight train in East Palestine, Ohio. The disaster led to a massive explosion and the release of toxic chemicals, including levels of dioxin hundreds of times higher than what's considered safe. Meanwhile, CNN reports 7 U.S. government investigators briefly fell ill in early March while studying the possible health impacts of the disaster. The investigators with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reported sore throats, headaches, coughing, and nausea. Starbucks has fired another worker who led a historic union organizing campaign in 2021. Alexis Rizzo was a shift supervisor at Starbucks' Genesee Street store in Buffalo, New York, one of the first 2 stores in the U.S. to form a Starbucks union. She was fired just weeks after the National Labor Relations Board accused Starbucks of engaging in egregious and widespread misconduct to prevent workers from organizing, and just 2 days after former Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz testified to Congress about the company's union-busting record. Rizzo worked at Starbucks for 7 years since she was 17 years old. She told Democracy Now! Her firing left her devastated.
I'm going to be fighting tooth and nail to get my job back. I think it's not at all a coincidence that this happened 2 days after Howard Schultz had his ego bruised in front of the Senate. I was fired that day. 2 other partners in Buffalo were fired on the same day. Another very vocally pro-union shift supervisor here was written up on the same day. And I don't think that's a coincidence whatsoever. I think Howard Schultz was trying to prove to us that he does still have power over us, and this is how he can exercise it. But it's not just that for me. It's losing my whole life.
To see our interview with Jason Saxton, another Starbucks worker fired after organizing a Starbucks union, visit democracynow.org, as well as to see the confrontation between Bernie Sanders and Starbucks former CEO Howard Schultz. And Finland is formally joining NATO today in a move that doubles NATO's border with Russia. Finland and Russia share an 800-mile border. Finland's joining the military alliance a week after Turkey's parliament voted to ratify Finland's membership. Turkey and Hungary have yet to approve Sweden as a new member of NATO. The Kremlin decried Finland joining NATO as a, quote, assault on our security. We'll have more on this story with a debate later in the broadcast. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Juan Gonzalez in Chicago. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.